Welcome to The Rocketry Show, TheRocketryShow.com. This is a special Thank You Patrons Day podcast. And what's happening right now, and all of you on Patreon probably have noticed that today is the day that was designated as Thank You Patrons Day, Monday, the 19th. And so this podcast is basically us saying thank you. And we're going to tell you a little bit about what your support has meant to the show. And there's been a lot of improvements on this podcast, and it happened very quickly thanks to the support of patrons like you.
Absolutely.
And it allows us to get around the places. And we're going to talk about some of the notable events we've been able to go to. And we were just talking before we started recording that memorable one for you, Daniel, was the Narcon
2017.
event.
Yeah, Narcon 2017. Now, this is... I will say that, when I first started listening to this podcast, I was new to model rocketry. I had a blog that I was writing. I'm kind of a podcast junkie, and I happened to find this podcast on the Rocketry Forum, and I started listening to it. And, it was just you two guys talking. It was the first few episodes. And, I'm really into rocketry, so I really liked it and everything. And then one day I got an email from you, and you had seen my blog, and you said, hey, we'd like to have you on and talk to you, because I was mostly writing for beginners. And at the time, you guys were mostly talking high power stuff and kind of, experienced rocket stuff. And so, we came on and we hit it off, and Jim and I had a certain chemistry. And so you guys decided to keep me on. And it was fun. It was a thing, I would get on the internet every couple of weeks or something with a little headset and Skype into the studio. And it didn't sound great, but we would talk rockets, and it was kind of fun. And more and more people started listening to the show. And then we started getting sponsors who, like at the time it was BuyRocketMotors.com and John Rocket. And we had one or two sponsors. Didn't have as many as we have now, which thank you to our sponsors as well. Then we started some of the expenses of running the podcast that you had to absorb personally started to be taken care of through that. But it was still kind of like, just a thing that we did, part of our hobby. Every now and then, we would run into somebody who'd heard the show. And but then when the patrons started coming in through Patreon, then it started to get real. And I don't think I realized the change. The real change for me came when CG, you and I went to Narcon 2017, which I'd heard of Narcon. I'd always wanted to go to it. Yep. This time it enabled me, I had to pay for my own plane ticket, but I was able to get my registration covered and get my hotel fees covered, which I just couldn't have done. I couldn't have made the whole trip myself. And so I actually got to go to a national event to cover the rocketry, to cover Narcon for the Rocketry Show
as a journalist,
as a sort of a hobby rocket journalist. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without the support, partly, of course, of our corporate sponsors, but especially of our patrons. And, I went there and I was a little bit ill prepared, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to talk to a few people. I was a little nervous. And, but then we got there and we're running all over the Smithsonian and we're shooting video, and they're letting us do it standing by the space shuttle. And then I got to talk to James Barrowman, and I didn't have a heart attack. And
I remember that.
And, the episode turned out really good. And then it was when I came home and I heard the episode, and I watched the YouTube videos on our YouTube channel, and I heard the actual audio episode, including the extended interview with James Barrowman, and all of the different interviews we did and all the different coverage we did. Then I was like, "What? This is a real podcast now. This isn't just three guys, messing around in somebody's basement. This is actually a real podcast." And it does have a limited audience in that you have to be involved in rocketry in order to sort of get what the show is about. But it's a vibrant hobby, and it's a growing hobby, and there are lots of people out there who haven't heard the podcast yet, but they love rocketry. They love talking rockets. And none of this would be possible if it weren't for the patrons. And then we moved on to talk to astronauts and actual professionals in the field. It wasn't just a couple guys from their local club talking about what they flew that week. It's actual Jolly Logic and Lock Precision and Aerotech and all of these basically the industries that make up our hobby. And I think the patrons on Patreon are the basis of that. Without them, I don't think we'd be able to do the stuff that would make those guests and those sponsors take us seriously, because it would just be a couple guys talking about what they flew that weekend,
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so thank you for enabling us to do that stuff. It's sort of like, we do what we can to make the show good, make the show interesting. But you have to have an audience who is receptive and who's willing to chip in a few bucks a month. And really, that's the great thing about Patreon. You can just pay like a few dollars a month. And that means that the thing that you're listening to gets better.
Yes.
And you don't have to be like deep pockets. So I'm gonna
your Daddy Warbucks.
I'm gonna spend $100 a month on this podcast that I like, or what have you. It could be like a couple bucks a month here and there, and all of that, all of those little bits of change thrown into the bucket makes a big difference. It makes it so that we can actually bring you some more interesting stuff. We can go do the interesting stuff and cover it and record it all, and then bring it to you, so that if you don't get to go to these events, you can experience them. If you get to go to these events, we get to talk to you, and sometimes you get to hear your own voice on the podcast. That's always kind of fun.
Yeah.
Or you get to find out about new innovations and new stuff coming out in the hobby, or even in real aerospace space professionals. And so I just think my mind is kind of blown where this hobby has gone, or where this podcast has gone over the past few years. And without the patrons, it never would have happened. So thank you.
Or I would say
Absolutely.
It probably would happen, but happen very slowly, and we probably wouldn't be able to cover as much as we're able to cover.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
It would definitely be. Yes, you're right. Yeah, we would be better than we had been at the beginning.
Yes,
but I think
not as far along as we are now.
Not as far as long as we are now. And I think the fact that the patrons have and the sponsors, both of those make the show feel more professional and sound better, so that
Absolutely.
more people take the show seriously, so that they are willing to support the show, so that the show can get even better. And we're hoping to do lots more stuff in the future. It's beginning to look like we might do some really exciting stuff in the future. What we've done so far has been very exciting, but there's lots of places to go in this hobby and in this podcast.
Yes, there is. And
it's kind of interesting, like when you're talking about what the patrons can do for us. I have a little bit of a tangible, real life thing that because of the patrons, it's actually caused the podcast to get better, at least from my standpoint. When we were able to get some mobile equipment to move around and get some stuff, that made a big difference. And here's kind of why. When we started out years ago.
Yeah, it's funny to hear that.
I know absolutely nothing about audio. I know nothing about like doing a podcast. CG came to me one day at the local club launch and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sounds cool." No idea what it's about or had any clue, but I learned along the way. And one aspect of that was once we got the mobile gear, and because of the patrons, and Patreon helped us get that equipment that we needed, I was able to roam around and not be encumbered. And I didn't realize how powerful that was until I went to TARC and then learned how to use the equipment. And then later at the National Sport launch, when I actually had this idea to kind of put stuff together and kind of put the listener into it with a soundscape kind of a thing, like, that you hear. And I never would have thought of that or done that or even done any of that stuff. And it's just because of that simple thing of like, okay, we have enough money to get a mobile recorder. Okay, great. But it allowed me to kind of explore it and kind of push it a little bit, a lot faster than I thought I could or knew about. Like I'm just sort of going with the flow here, but it sort of evolved into something. And just that simple little equipment change made a huge difference because I felt free to move around. And I thought, well, what else can I do to make this better? How can I make this better for the listeners? How can I make it better for everybody? And then starting to put it together with just that freedom of movement that one simple piece of equipment made was pretty significant for me, just from my standpoint of learning about what all this is about and trying to do it the right way. And CG has been great along the way, and just to kind of guide me through, because I'm not an audio professional at all, but I am having fun and I'm passionate about this, and the patrons help that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I would like to say the seeds of what became the National Sport Launch episode was actually when you were covering your students launching the rockets. And just by happenstance, you've got enough ambient stuff where we were able to put together. That's where the concept behind what became the National Sport Launch episode happened. And I would say that for Bama Blastoff, I was able to take it another step further in that we bought more recorders. So I had recorders going all over the place while I was running around getting interviews, which is why I have so much audio, to try to give you even more of an immersive experience from the field out there. So so it's helping us to really get out there and be creative with these things. And I'm really excited to when we get done editing all the audio from the Bama Blastoff, what that's going to be like.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's creative because I love being able to, like I said, I never knew anything about podcasting, but I'm in it deep enough now that I'm actually having fun because I'm exploring doing new things. Like, how can I make it better? What can we do to make the show better? Who would be interested in hearing about this? Let's get the audience, all that stuff. And it's just without the help of the patrons and the supporters, and this never would have happened. So, just thank you for that, because it's like allowing us to explore stuff that's way beyond what I ever thought possible.
And even on stuff like this conversation we're having now, there's you can hear the effect of the patrons, and that as Daniel pointed out when we first got Daniel on the show, he sounded like he was at the end of a satellite connection from Mars or something. And and that's what the best we could do at the time. Daniel had whatever he had laying around connected to his computer. And we tried to work around that as best we could. But once we started getting reliable cash flow in, we were able to slowly update the equipment. And we called I would jokingly call Daniel's home setup there. What did I call that? Outpost East or something like that, because it just felt like Easter. Felt like Siberia or something, trying to get a signal back. And so now when Daniel's talking, he sounds like he's sitting here in the room with Jim and I, but Jim and I are not in the same room either. So we were able to
I'm still in my basement though.
Yeah, in your basement with your bathrobe on.
Not today.
So basically with the technology, we were able to standardize on all the gear that's being used, so that we all sound like we're in the same room. And it surprises a lot of people that we're not in the same room together. and they
500 miles.
Yeah, yes. Jim and I are the closest, so which is why he sounded pretty decent anyway, because I was able to haul some old pieces of equipment up to him to start the show with. But and we had our adventures with that. And it all started off with Skype. But now, thanks to the support of patrons, we're able to get some real services and real equipment in, so everyone sounds like like they're in the same room. So that's another way. And if you want to have proof of that, just on the patrons of the show are able to listen to old shows. So when you listen to the old shows, you can hear the quality change in that happened from the early days till now, especially when it comes to Daniel and all of Daniel's early episodes. Well, Daniel's early episodes are now starting to appear on Patreon on our archives, and we do post regularly archived episodes, older episodes for the patrons to hear. So that's one way to hear, what effect your support has been having, and it's all been positive.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to listen to those early episodes, actually. It sounds so different, and you forget what they sounded like until you go back and listen to them. And the content was fine, Although I think probably I've gotten more relaxed over time. Just
well, you can hear yourself now.
Yeah, I can hear myself
that's
now. But what it used to be, I couldn't actually hear my own voice through my headphones. Which, I mean, if you don't do podcasting or radio, I mean, that might sound like weird, but a lot of people listening to this probably remember when cell phones first came out, and you could never tell if it was working because you couldn't hear your own voice through the earpiece like you could with old telephones. And now it's so standard that you can hear your own voice that people who were young enough that they don't remember those old cell phones don't even notice. As I've mentioned to people, but when I was looking for a set of headphones to do the podcast, I was going to these stores and saying, "Yeah, I need a set of headphones where I can hear my own voice." And they said, "What are you talking?" Like all of the salespeople were in their early 20s, and I said, "You know how cell phones used to you couldn't hear your own voice because it didn't play your voice into your own ear." And there's like, what are you talking about? It doesn't play in your ear. Yes, no, it does. You don't notice it because it allows you to modulate your voice. And you don't notice it if it's working because it sounds normal to you. But if it stopped working, you would think your phone was dead.
Right.
And so I was never able to find a set of headphones that would play back into my own ears. So I had to take one just so that I had to hear you with one ear. And I had to take the other cup off my other ear so that I could hear my own voice just speaking in the room. And I could never tell, am I close enough to the microphone? Am I sounding really good or am I not?
Kind of creepy, actually.
Do I sound kind of distorted?
Do I sound a little distorted or am I,
do I sound like a melodic disc jockey? Do I sound like that the disc jockey in the urban station for Pillow Talk? Yes,
in the heat
long.
Of the night.
But you can't really do that right if you can't hear yourself, though.
Exactly. No. Yeah, you sound horrible.
That's the point.
You sound like somebody trying too hard.
Like you guys.
It's kind of funny that you brought that up because, like me not having any audio experience, I never even thought about it. And when we changed over in the equipment, it made a huge difference, especially when I was going mobile. I mean, I didn't even know about it, and just sort of like, oh yeah, now I know what they're talking about. Then it made a huge difference. So you're right. You don't think about it.
So, I mean, you can record a podcast on anything. You can if you want to start a podcast, you can record audio on your phone, and if you find
we tried that,
you can do it. You can do it for really minimal amount of money, but nobody's going to listen to your podcast because it's going to sound bad. Even if it's an interesting subject, even if you're an interesting person, if the basic quality of the sound is not good. You're gonna have a real hard time getting people to listen to your podcast. You have to have, there's a basic level of quality that you need for people not to go, I can't listen to this. It's too hard for me to listen to. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and it's even down to being an audio guy. I made sure this was the case from day one, but it comes down to certain things that certain listeners will comment on, and they're not technical at all, but they're used to hearing all kinds of podcasts, and the one thing they appreciate is in the audio quality of the show. They say, whatever you guys are doing, your levels are always good. You're not blasting me out of my seat when everybody laughs. It's not like I'm not being overloaded, and it doesn't sound crackly, and so again, I mean, a lot of that stuff was equipment I've had before, because it's, it's what I've done professionally and for fun. But a lot of the stuff I had was old, and we had to, we did the show limping along on really old gear. And there was several podcasts where we were delayed for like 15, 20, 30 minutes while I messed around with some wiring underneath to try to figure out what went bad. And, Jim, wait, you've got a buzz in there. Hang on.
Right.
And so, again, the support of the patrons along with our sponsors, but the patrons helped this along quickly. We're able to replace anything that was going bad and get stuff better, and then we're able to standardize some stuff. So not only are we able to get around the places and cover more things, more events, and have the money to do so, thanks to you, we're also technically able to improve on our program and make things sound, almost like I think we basically sound like something that could come out of an NPR podcast right now, which is kind of cool.
Well, you've always said that from the beginning. I'm like, I remember when we were starting out, you're like, I want it to sound like we're all in the same room, in the same studio. I remember you saying that from day one. And I think because of the help of the patrons and the equipment upgrades and everything, you got it. And now it's like, where can we go from here?
Yes, now it's like,
that's the exciting part.
We all sound like we're in the same room. Now what? Oh, we need to really cover more things on the show. And look at that. Mm-hmm. We got to get there. Look at that. We got to be able to get over here. Wouldn't it be nice if we can cover that event? And
no, it's a lot of fun. It's exciting. It is. It's I never thought how deep it could go, but boy, it's been a wild ride and a lot of fun, and along the way. So I've learned a lot as I go, and hopefully I'll learn more because that's what makes it fun.
And moving forward now, for going into the future, where do we want to go? We still want to try to get as much support from listeners as we can because our goals right now are not limited to what you hear us doing. Right now, we're able to travel around, but it's a very limited range, pretty much east of the Mississippi right now. And we would love to be able to cover things like the crazy launches out in the desert out west. Out in the
Thunder Down Under.
Yeah, Thunder Down Under and other places in the world. So we have visions. We want to be able to cover more and get to more places and cover rocketry in places outside of our own country. Hopefully we can grow with the support of the patrons and continued support of the sponsors. Although I don't know how much farther we can go with the sponsors because I think the show itself is pretty much maxed out with commercials. But
we don't want to have too many commercials because that's annoying.
Yeah, we don't want to become like a radio station. We'll be back after these messages, and 2 hours later, hey, we're back, and oh god, we got to take another break again. And so
it's for the listeners. Right. That's what we're for. That's what we're here for.
So I think we've taken the commercial thing about as far as we can take it right now. But we can still grow with the patrons. So again, for all of you who have been supporting us this whole time, thank you so much. And hopefully you enjoy what we do enough to stick with us in the long haul. And hopefully we'll be able to pick up more folks. So this whole thing was basically a podcast to say thank you so much to our patrons. Hashtag thank you patrons. I think on that note, we're going to run off and try to work on some more shows.
Sounds good.
All right. I am CG.
I am Gene.
And I'm the Rocket Noob.
Thanks again, folks.